Hello everyone and welcome to SplitSecond. This week we are joined by one of our patrons, Aajimu, a really cool guy who brews some spicy decks, some of which you might already seen in our videos. He's playing his spell-slinging Omnath, Baal is on Kylep, Teifer FlashAndretti's Elsha to Infinite and Beyond, David is on Firrlo's Emry, and Luís is on a personal stormy reacting brew with Krark and Silas. Before we get to see today's keeps, we will reveal the winner of our 8,000 subscribers giveaway. And the winner is... Kabargas! Congratulations, you just won 3 Commander Legends boosters, graciously sponsored by our LGS Arena Porto. Now let's see those keeps. Aajimu was the one starting with 2 Snow Forests and a Nictus trying to nix for lands. Firrlo Elves and Elvish Spirit Guide can ramp him up for Deadly Shock or What Is Yours Is Mine Willow Satyr. Baal had a good hand as well, with an Arid Mesa and Exotic Orchard for lands, Solving as ramp. Hullbreacher doesn't do much alongside Will of Misfortune, but he has a gamble to maybe get a good will, and Flusterstorm as a backup. David's hand is not so explosive, but quite controlling. He has 2 islands, a Lion's Eye Diamond that can help when discounting Emry, a Gitaxian Probe, Delay and Mana Drain to protect him or decide what sticks to the board, and a Back to Basics that can hinder Baal and Luís's plans a lot. Luís also has some potential. He has a Badlands and a Polluted Delta for lands, a Talisman of Dominance for ramp. Gamble can get him anything, and if it's an artifact it can also be cast by Silas in case it's discarded. Baal is a good cost reducer for the 2 other cards, Deflecting Sword and Time Twister as a probable refueler. Ready for the match? Aajimu starts things up with a Snow Forest into a Firrlo Elves. Baal goes ahead playing and cracking an Arid Mesa for a Volcanic Highland. He then casts a Sol Ring and passes. David is curious about Baal's hands, so he plays an island and a Gitaxian Probe. He draws from it and passes. Luís starts his turn with a Polluted Delta for a Volcanic Island too. He then gambles for a Mana Crypt and randomly discards a Time Twister, which was his turn 2 plan. He then casts the Mana Crypt and follows it with the Talisman of Dominance before passing. On his turn, Aajimu plays another Snow Forest, exiles an Elvish Spirit Guide for green mana and casts a spicy Willow Satyr. We all check what he does and he passes. Baal plays an Exotic Orchard and passes fully untapped. David plays another island and casts a Lion's Eye Diamond, reducing the cast of his Emry. He's really sad as he mills 4 non-artifact cards and passes. Luís' crypt spares him a bolt. He plays Badlands and casts a Grim Monolith. He finishes with Silas before passing pretty well ramped up. Aajimu plays a Nictus and passes the turn. In his end step, Baal casts a flashy Hullbreacher. On his turn, Baal starts things up with a Plateau into a top deck Dockside, netting 5 treasures. He then casts a Gamble and mistakenly goes for a Windfall. He randomly discards a Miscast, and then casts Windfall. Aajimu responds with a flashy Yeva Nature's Herald, and before Windfall resolves, David cracks his LED, since he was getting no cards either way and he had the most cards in hand. This way, Baal only draws 3 and generates 9 treasures. After this, Baal casts Elsha, forgetting about the Satyr, looks at the top card of his library, and as he tries to pass, Aajimu steals his commander to avoid any shenanigans. On his turn, David activates Emry, targeting Mesmeric Orb, and casts it to start filling his graveyard. He passes. On his upkeep, Luís mills 4 to the Orb and the Crypt spares him again. He plays Marsh Flats, and since Back to Basics and Choke were discarded already, he gets an Underground Sea. He goes to combat and Baal casts a Red Elemental Blast on the Silas, since Luís would be able to cast the milled Ballast Citadel. He finishes with Silas, a bit sad, he passes. Aajimu decides not to untap the Satyr and mills 4 to the Orb. He's able to cast creatures with Flash, so he passes like a blue mage would. Baal mills 4 to the Orb, plays a command tower, and then casts Smothering Tithe with non-treasures, since he'd rather have some stuff milled like a random Savines. He then attacks Luís with Hullbreacher to chip down some of his life, since he'll try to slam that Citadel once again. David mills 3 to the Orb, draws and pays for the Tithe. He plays a Darksteel Citadel and then activates Emry to cast LED from his graveyard. On his end step, Luís taps the Talisman to mill 1 more card. Luís mills 5 total and the Crypt finally hits him for 3. He doesn't pay for the Tithe and attacks David with Silas. It goes through, so he chooses the Citadel for his trigger. He casts it and it resolves, so he looks at the top card of his library and decides not to cast it. As he's passing, Aajimu activates Nictus and casts Omnath with Flash due to Yeva. He remains with 3 green in his mana pool. On his turn, he mills 4 to the Orb, with a certain flying spaghetti monster going to his graveyard, and keeps Elsha under his control. He pays for the Tithe and sings Yeva to Luís. Luís is now able to cast the top card of his library, a Reset. He untaps 3 lands, milling 3 more. The damage connects, and then Aajimu is happy about that reset, as he casts a Seed Time. He then takes some value out of Elsha as he casts a Chord of Calling from the top of his library to fetch a Collector Oof to the board. As he announced it, Baal and David tap their artifacts before the spell resolves, so they mill some more. Aajimu passes to his turn, milling 6 to the orb, and doesn't pay for the tithe. He starts things up with a Carpet of Flowers and then attacks Luís with Yeva and Omnath, which he pumps to 13 by flaunting some mana with Nykthos. On his second main phase, he casts Reap with the help of Carpet, targeting Luís. He gets Emrakul and Return of the Wild Speaker. He casts the Big Spaghetti Monster and targets Baal with its trigger, as he wants to deal with Hullbreacher to draw a bunch. Baal is now being controlled by Aajimu and mills 7 to the orb.
No!
You can hear the cries as he top decks a Final Fortune. He attacks Hullbreacher at the mind-controlling Aajimu, which blocks and takes him down. Main phase 2, he is forced to cast Final Fortune and taps out, so he mills some more. Aajimu takes this opportunity to freely cast Return of the Wild Speaker, drawing a whopping 13 cards. The fatal extra turn is added after this one, so it will resolve before the extra turn from Emrakul. Baal now mills 4 to the orb, and top decks a Chain of Vapor. He ponders his options as it is his last turn and casts Chain of Vapor on the Willow Satyr to get Elsha back in hopes the top card of his deck can perform some kind of miracle. Aajimu decides not to copy the Chain. Baal then slowly reaches for the top card, and it's an Underworld Breach. He casts it, it resolves, so he now casts the Chain of Vapor on the Oof, since Aajimu has no mana stored in Omnath to flash him again. He decides not to copy it since Baal can bounce his Dockside and get more value from there. Baal then escapes Hullbreacher, followed by a Wheel of Fortune to go for everyone else's hands. It resolves, so Baal draws 7 and gets 21 treasures. He looks at the top card and it's a Brain Freeze, so he doesn't even need to gamble for it. However, milling his opponents is not enough since he won't have another turn, and Aajimu does have 2 Titan Shufflers. He mills 15 and then escapes Mystical Tutor for dramatic reversal to the top. Escapes Brainstorm as well to get it to his hand, and then escapes Isochron Scepter, to which it imprints Dramatic Reversal. By generating infinite mana, he is also able to mill himself due to the orb, triggering Elsha's prowess too. He then casts Swords to Plowshares on Elsha for quasi-infinite life and finishes the table with a gigantic Rolling Earthquake. GG. After this alignment of the solar system, we decided to go for another game. This time, Luís won the die roll. He mulliganed down to 6 and kept a 2-lander with Forbidden Orchard and Sunken Ruins. Izzet Signet will be his ramp, and then he has Preordain to dig for something, Quicken is mostly to react with Storm Sorceries, Deflecting Swat is an all-timer versatile card, and he bottomed Transmute Artifact. Aajimu has a nice ramped up 7 with 2 Snow Forests, a Mana Crypt and a Carpet of Flowers. He also has 2 Nisas, Vastwood Seer and the World Shaking one. With all these mana, Skyshroud Claim doesn't look so expensive to cast. Baal kept his second 7 with a single island, Lion's Eye Diamond and Mox Opal longing for a 3rd artifact. Ponder can dig him for a 3rd one or some lands. Deflecting Swat will be harder to cast now. Reshape can get him any artifact at the cost of another one, and Hullbreacher found its way back again. Lastly, David has an explosive hand with an Ancient Tomb, City of Traitors and Inventor's Fair for lands. Spellskite is some good protection on a stick, Chromox unfortunately only has a Chain of Vapor to be pitched to, and Mesmeric Orb also finds its way back. Let's see how this one unravels. Luís starts his turn with Forbidden Orchard, giving Baal a Spirit and casts a Preordain, bottoming both and passing. Aajimu sadly didn't get an island for his Carpet, so he goes for a Snow Forest and then a Mana Crypt, which allows him to cast Nissa Vastwood Seer, fetching for another Snow Forest and passing. Baal top decks a Mana Crypt, so he plays an island, and then a Mana Crypt, and follows it with a Mox Opal, and then LED, turning the Opal online. He then casts Ponder and finds yet another artifact, Sol Ring. He passes pretty happy with the outcome. David won't stay behind with an Ancient Tomb into a Chromox, exiling Chain of Vapor. He casts Mesmeric Orb, and a turn 1 Emry. After this turn 1, Luís feels a bit behind, as he plays a Sunken Ruins and passes. Aajimu's script spares him 3 life, and is set to mill Collector Oof to the orb. He plays a Snow Forest and casts Skyshroud Claim. He then casts a Carpet of Flowers and passes. On his hand step though, Baal casts Hullbreacher. Baal mills 4 to the orb, takes 3 from the crypt, and casts Fabricate to drink for Sensei's Divining Top. He casts it, looks at the top, Seeing a fetch on top, momentarily forgets about the orb, activates the top to draw and plays the Prismatic Vista, undoing all his work to get the top. David mills 2 to the orb, plays an Inventor Sphere and activates Emry to cast Mox Ember from his graveyard. He follows it with a Mana Vault and finishes the turn with a Spellskite. In his hand step, Luís taps a land to be able to mill 1 more. Baal decides to crack the Vista right now, since he's losing the top either way to the orb, at least it gets shuffled back in. David also considers the possibility of an opposition agent, so he decides to crack the Fair to get a Basalt Monolith. Funnily enough, Luís does mill the opposition agent to the orb, so it was a close call there. He casts Izzet Signet, giving Baal the Orchard Spirit and passes. Aajimu takes 3 from the crypt and mills 4 to the orb. He adds 2 blue with the carpet, plays another Snow Forest, and casts Nissa, who shakes the world. He upticks her, animating a Snow Forest, and casts Omnath. He swings at Baal with the forest, and he does not block. In his hand step, Baal taps both islands to mill some more. He mills 5 to the orb and takes 3 from the crypt. He plays and cracks a Marsh Flats for the plateau. He then casts Reshape for 0, sacrificing LED as an additional cost, and gets a Tormod's Crypt to try to stop David in case he does go for the self-milling plan. David mills 4 to the orb, takes 1 from the vault, plays an island, and after some pondering he passes the turn. Luís mills 2 to the orb and casts a Jeweled Lotus. He cracks it to cast Krark, to which Aajimu responds with a crop rotation for a Gaia's Cradle. With the last flag for commanders only, Luís casts Silas and passes. Aajimu floats 3 green to the Omnath before getting to his turn. He mills 6 to the orb and wins the Crypt Troll. He floats some more mana onto Omnath and casts Ram Through onto Allbreacher. Baal, however, responds with the last card in his hand, a Deflecting Sword, redirecting it to Emry, so David has to redirect it to Spellskite, which he does. Aajimu then upticks Nissa and tapping another forest and sadly milling an Ugin in the process. He then swings with everything at Baal, who shumps the big Omnath and takes the rest. In his hand step, Baal taps Sol Ring and the land, so he mills 7 in his next turn. He wins the Crypt Troll and casts his Elsha. In his hand step, David activates Emry, targeting Shimmermere, and no one responds, so he casts it. He then mills 4 to the orb, takes 1 from the vault, and plays a City of Traitors. He ponders for a bit, but decides to pass. Luís taps his land to mill 1 more. He mills 3 to the orb and fails to draw yet another land, as he swings Silas at David, who doesn't block, and Luís chooses his Jeweled Lotus as a target for Silas' trigger. He casts it in his second main phase and passes. In his hand step, Aajimu floats some more mana onto Omnath, who is now able to one-shot players if unblocked. Aajimu mills 8 to the orb, noticeably, a Genesis Wave, Praetor's Council and a Nyx Bloom. He wins the Crypt Troll and attacks Luís with both forests, before floating 2 with a forest and playing a Glacial Chasm. He floats 2 more and upticks Nissa and tapping it and milling another card. After this, he passes the turn. Baal taps out, so he mills some more, digging for that Savines. As the untapped triggers get put onto the stack in his upkeep, he responds to them with a Wheel of Fortune from the top thanks to Elsha. David responds by casting Basalt Monolith thanks to Shimmermere. It resolves, so now with the wheel on the stack, as it seems to be resolving, Aajimu tries his best at countering a red spell in green as he casts a Squall Line for 36, in hopes it resolves. Player removal also counts, right? No one has an answer, so they all die to this massive hurricane, and this justifies that chasm last turn. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match, everyone. A big rainstorm took everyone by surprise, and Elsha got the stars aligned just for her. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, Stefan, TJ Rapp, Mike Purr, Aajimu, Heated Shield, Drunken Housecat, V, RJ, and Starfall, our Stark Breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing, or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Join us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then!